Okay, new rule. And I'm trying to actualize and implement this rule. When I'm live streaming and I suddenly go off on a rant that coulda, shoulda, would have been better suited for a podcast, I need to grab my phone and audio record it, because then I can upload it as a podcast and transcribe it, which is what I'm doing now, while simultaneously narrating that idea, thought process to my nearly non-existent live stream audience. So I was in the midst of just sort of getting ready to talk about stuff. Getting ready to play a particular video game called Assassin's Creed Unity, set in France. And I opened up by first doing a little pregame chat lounge session where I discussed yesterday's derailment of my live stream show, where I set out to play Unity, but I opened each episode with a little... Well, I opened the first episode that I did, my first session when I went live to play Unity. I thought I would do a pregame chat lounge session where I would tackle a little procedural step in the fan fiction art making from a character, a screenshot of a character that's part of the game. And I ended up spending most of the day doing that and or rambling and talking about stuff that shoulda, coulda, would have been a small segment for a podcast episode or its own podcast episode. And that just happened to be now, so here we are. Let's come full circle. Forgive me for anyone watching the video that is live streamed. This will be a bit redundant. But I was teasing a couple of games that I'm going to be doing a first impression review of in the not too distant future. And the one that triggered the rant, or no, rant is a loaded term. Let's call it mini TED-Talk, which I'm now going to reenact for you, is Trials of Mana, which recently got lovingly re-engineered for publication and being ported. I don't know how to conjugate that without just adding other words. Being ported to the Xbox. It's finally here. And I was explaining, there's another game from the Mana franchise that's also been released simultaneously, both of which were featured in the recent gaming expo show and lecture, which I think happened in Japan somewhere. I wasn't paying that close of attention to the industry. I kind of heard about it after the fact. But I digress. The first one was originally a isometric 2D sprite-based left, right, up, down scroller adventure RPG. Standard stuff. Well, it's from 1999, so seminal and influential game. I don't have the name of it in front of me, but it's like something of mana. The something of mana. Just like this is called the Trials of Mana. And this other one is full 3D. So we have, instead of pixelated little 2D characters, we have fully rendered 3D characters. And I'm looking at the beginning of the trailer. I was about to play the trailer, and I was over-explaining that I'm probably going to love and appreciate the first game, but choose not to play it for the reasons that I have that are purely about me budgeting my time. And then this other one, Trials of Mana, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to love it or hate it, because as a 3D RPG, one of the other concerns is that I love Japanese culture, much like all things related to being an Anglophile. I guess, I don't know what the technically correct term is. I don't think it's Japanophile, right? They probably use the original language term, and I don't know what that is right off the top of my head. But I digress. But I don't completely fetishize Japanese culture or the Japanese people. I mean, I think that's kind of bad. I have loved artwork that originates that's specifically of their culture in a powerful way. Things like, for example, Berserker. I would never claim to be a carte blanche anime fan. I would lose whatever fun pissing contest. It's not a peeing contest. If you change it to peeing, it just turns into something wrong? Are you okay? As opposed to you're trying to prove you're a man. I would fail. I would lose whatever kind of man-to-man or woman-to-man nerd contest of who knows more about manga, who knows more about anime, who knows more about video games. from Japan. I don't have that. I'm not that kind of nerd. But, like, I love Ghost in the Shell. And I magically, mysteriously found and then lost the one and only, either unlicensed or it was licensed and then lost it or something happened, first-person shooter video game, just when the graphics on PC got perfect. They, were just like, better than Doom, no jagged lines, everything, everything got curvy. And then the point of the TED Talk was that I noticed in the artwork for this Trials of Mana that the ladies are, in classic Japanese art style, a little extra on the buxom and sexy and wearing skimpy outfits. Now, this is nothing new in video games. This is nothing new in comic books. This is nothing new in media, right? Either in American media or in media around the world. Now, it's different. It's been taken to different levels. And what I was acknowledging for my live stream audience, and I'm now trying to recapture for my podcast audience, is that, and I'm not trying to brag here. This is not a flex. I believe that this is a calling to all men in our world. If there's a point to life, is to become self-aware and self-actualized in going, oh man, none of this is okay. Most of this is very much not normal. And the human species needs to heal and transcend and evolve away from and abdicate these toxic things. One of them is, of course, patriarchy and its extremely toxic psychological manipulation tools that are all inherently, generally speaking, because it's patriarchy, chauvinist or sexist, right? And I should have grabbed the phone and started the recording to make this a podcast episode when I sensed the fact that I was going to have to say the following sentence. We have to be frank with ourselves take responsibility and step up to it as the men who have inherited this mess. Right? As I said to myself yesterday or the day before, we are either all down to lift each other up, and that has to be everyone, like, all or nothing. Or we just accept that we're going to let everyone shit in everyone else's mouths and that we will get pooped on and that we will probably give into it and poop on others. And I often go to great lengths to caveat anything I might say and to argue against other people using this tactic. Absolutist statements are almost never absolutely true. And I also throw out the challenge. Somebody bring to my attention a factually correct, grammatically absolutist statement that is absolutely true. And by that, I mean, has zero exceptions. If you bring me a statement to which I go, well, this is an exception to that, so it's not absolutely true, and your response is, well, there's always exceptions to the rules, then you need a dictionary, because you do not know what absolutist means, especially when translated and, sort of transmogrified into ideological statements. And one of the things that is, that this brings to our attention is that, like, patriarchy isn't absolutely true, right? Like, and it's wrong. Well, as a young person, I came to a realization, right? And then I questioned it and tested it and verified it for the rest of my life growing up. And I continue to do so. But I am firm in this conviction. I stand on a hill which I will not die on. I will preach and raise other people up. That as a man, no matter what kind of man you've thought of yourself as being, no matter what kind of identity construct you are attached to and clinging to, no matter how you define your masculinity, the goddess Mother Nature, Gaia herself, the giver of life, the cosmic divine mother that is And this is not about making the universe cis-heteronormative, because even non-cisgendered people have what we talk about in terms of like the polemic of male and female energies or attributes, right? And when we talk about divinity, we're not talking about the tools involved in the material packaging. We're talking about their divine energies. Although, we must also loop back on that statement. In my humble opinion, after a lifetime of seeking and questioning, I've come to the conclusion, which would be very difficult for me to change away from. It would require massive amounts of evidence, like direct phenomenological evidence, because my conclusion is based on direct phenomenological evidence that I've experienced and that I think other people can experience too. It's just very effing elusive and tricky and requires a lot of purging of mind filters. But put a pin on the corkboard right there, friends, because that's a whole nother discussion for another day. Whatever else planet Earth is, however else we might understand planet Earth, the one thing, the one aspect, the one attribute about it that everyone casually neglects, and I mean this in a non-absolutist way, plenty of people understand this, millions, I'm sure, but that society, in a broad stroke, generalized way, with all the caveats for the exceptions, obviously, because this is not an absolutist statement, society at large does not encourage us to relate to her that way. Does not really empower us to realize that this quote-unquote place, and I put it in sarcasm quotes because a place is a locality made up of a collection of inanimate objects that is separate from some other locality, which is made up of a collection of inanimate objects. And that definition is flawed. One of the reasons I have a disagreement with both the flat earth community and those arguing against them, which can generally be tidied up, can be generally summarized as the globe earth community, is that both theories at a technical level, except for the variants that are exceptions, both theories, broadly speaking, have no acknowledgement of the reality, measurable and tangible and personally confirmable, that whatever else Mother Earth is, she is alive. She is a living system of living systems, and taken as a cumulative whole, she is a living, divine, cosmic, planetary uterus. I like using the technical term. Womb often, unfortunately, gets understood as room, especially by automated transcribing software. So uterus is a little stronger. And it's a little bit more graphic. And I'm not trying to be gross. And I'm not trying to objectify women. I'm trying to point out that this is a reality that the human species struggles with, has struggled with, used to be deeply intuitively in connection with. Long before we invented such nonsensical and toxic ideas as the elite and elitism, the privilege and elitism of white ethno-nationalist patriarchy. Okay, so this is all triggered because I realize I'm promoting a game that I'm going to do a review of, and I realized I should put out the disclaimer that it might contain character design art and rendered characters that are a little extra sexy, and may also simultaneously feel like a game targeted at young people, which, especially in puritanical American psychological terms, would be considered gross. And that, obviously does have its problematic issues because of what was discussed before I turned on the tape recorder, which inspired me to turn on this tape recorder. And that's that, unfortunately, no matter how you slice it, if you take an open-minded enough and honest enough review of your own personal life history and the realities of generational societal history, we have all been raised for centuries in a societal psychological conditioning system, because that's what culture is. Pin on the corkboard. Discussed it before in the podcast. We'll have to discuss it again, I'm sure. Let's not go spiraling out of control right here in this moment about that. But we've been all raised in this. And I'm not trying to build a conspiracy theory of something evil here. F that. Never mind that. I'm just talking about the fact that the human species needed a way to hand down information. Created it, let it become meta, and then super meta, or like, what's another? Uber meta, and then became unconscious. Almost a living force into its own will culture, right? We don't choose the cultures we are conditioned under. We can only choose how we respond to that cultural conditioning when we understand that it is cultural conditioning and that it is implicitly a part of our perceptual matrices of filters, right? Like, and pin on the corkboard in the podcast and on the live stream shows, we have gone on some sidebars about perception and how it actually works, where the convergence of the scientific and the meta-psycho-spiritual descriptions converge. If we really focus on that and understand that and explore it without preconceived notions, one ultimately arrives at the understanding, at the comprehension that perception does indeed work the way that certain guy, I forget if the term for him is guru. He may have had his controversies, but he also knew some shit. He may have been controversy free, but Muji, I don't know how he pronounces it. Something that starts with an N, has a J in the middle, and ends with an I. Please forgive me, I never heard it pronounced very often. But he said something to the effect of, you are simultaneously, and I'm probably butchering the quote, but I did make a meme of it that is word for word accurate. Somewhere, it's floating around somewhere on the internet. I'm surprised that never went viral. But we all are, to paraphrase, we all are, as individuals, as members of the human species, psychophysiologically and spiritually, simultaneously, the following things all at once. We are the perceiver doing the perception. We are the lens of perception filtering said perception. And we are the object being perceived. So we are perception incarnate, perceiving. That isn't even anymore a recap of what his quote was. That's me extrapolating from it. So go find his quote. I have it somewhere on my Instagram. But he breaks it down in 3 parts and connects it to something that Jesus taught. Or maybe it was a Jesus teaching that was interpreted by a saint somebody. I forget. But he's pointing out the simple reality that, as I pointed out in another episode recently, we have always been each other. And as a man that has come to a deep understanding of that in an iterative fashion over many episodes in life, and probably over many lifetimes, since reincarnation is inherently real but does not function in the way popular culture imagines it, because if we've always been each other, then we've always been everyone that has ever been, right? And if we really grasp that and understand it intellectually, understand it emotionally, understand it subliminally, understand it, if we overstand it, understand it, innerstand it, outerstand it, as someone else put it. I don't forget who made that term up, but it's a great one. Because everyone underestimates the meaning of understanding, and that there are other perspectives from which we could stand to perceive and achieve comprehension. As a man who processes these things, I realize there's a lot of cringe in like male culture of the male, all the cultural expressions of the patriarchal dominance of the male gaze has been, always was, continues to be problematic. And as men, we can't point the fingers and go, well, I didn't do it. It's not me. I'm not. We just need to step up and be like, real men don't do that. Yes, we find women attractive. And yes, we appreciate when women do things that are attractive. And yes, it's okay to celebrate beauty and attractiveness. But y'all, we've taken it too far. And that happened a long time ago. We took it so far as to oppress women and objectify them, dehumanize them, and make their beauty more important in art than it is in life. And we stripped that beauty of the inner components, of the mental, spiritual, energetic, psychological components. So, like, when in popular cultural terms, if we say beautiful woman, what most average people who are not this kind of self-aware yet, because they haven't been exposed to it, they just think of some popularized, objectified, visually glorified, visually lusted after celebrity woman that was formative in their youth in defining their stereotypes of what sexualized womanhood optimally might be. And the truth is, like, as women have spent lifetimes trying to explain to men, like, doing that to ourselves as men, doing that to women, doing that to ourselves collectively as a species, has produced nothing but toxicity and oppression, and must be questioned, must be understood, analyzed, in order to be effectively dismantled. And in order to do that, as I thematically return to, because it is the central point of my message, in order to do that, we must step up to the responsibility of acknowledging that even if we thought we were good guys our whole lives, we screwed up because we could not avoid the conditioning. We were bombarded by it every moment of every day, from the sublimated patriarchy in our family's language to the not so hidden sexism in marketing and entertainment, etc. And while there's nothing inherently wrong in depicting beautiful and attractive characters, there are boundaries and limits, and those must be respected. And we won't build consensus on that until, as men, we all step up to that responsibility of saying, hey, my brothers in manhood, I don't care what identity, what label you cling to, who you think you are, how much better you think you are than other men. Your manhood, i.e., the perceived importance and value of your genitalia, because that's what that is, does not give you or anyone, nor me, the right to either consciously be rude, derogatory, degenerate. There's a word I'm trying to say that degenerate got in the way of. Degrading, disrespectful, and either subliminally or overtly. Whether we understand it or not yet, it doesn't give us the right to get away with it. Quote unquote, boys will be boys is not okay. So we must be vigilant, hold each other accountable, especially in our real life relationships. When it comes to the men we relate to on a day-to-day basis, whether they are our brothers, whether they are our fathers and uncles, whether they are our elders, or they are our equals as in age range, or whether they are the younger generations of men in our lives, if they are acquaintances at the stores that we go to, or the pubs that we attend, that we socialize at, or they are close work friends, or lifelong good buddies, or best friends, or whatever. It's been said there's plenty of men doing this work. The problem is there are way too many men out there that are unhealthy in and of themselves, have unhealthy, hypersexualized, dehumanizing mental constructs that were implanted in them beyond their control and without their own consent because they were raised in patriarchy. And thus, it's way past time. It's overdue, folks. We must all step up to the responsibility of saying, yeah, I'm a part of it. I may not be, excuse me, as men, we must not paint all men with a absolutist brush. Just as, we wouldn't, right? Here's the irony. Based on real life encounters I've witnessed and interacted with, real life public discourse in public places, eye to eye with acquaintances and random strangers that strike up conversation and or, people I've known a long time, and of course, my lifetime's worth of public discourse on social media, because I literally, and this is a flex, this is an intentional flex, to anybody out there who's trying to argue against me, I've been having conversations like this with people like you since before AOL launched. I don't remember the exact date, but you might want to look it up. Check to see if you were even alive at the time. Look in your mind and remember if you were even capable of using the internet yet. Because years before AOL launched, I remember early access to a RapNet. Well, I didn't have early access to a RapNet because a RapNet existed before I was here in this country. But I remember oh, this is what the internet is? Interesting. And if you just dropped a RapNet, people would be like, what are you talking about? 90% of people today would be like, I'd have to look that up to know what it was. But I digress. It's not about men fighting men and getting confrontational. It's about all of us realizing that even amongst the best of us, we've stumbled, failed, have had flaws, have been the man that hurt a woman, even if we didn't mean to. Even if we didn't realize we were doing it. And that all of it is interconnected at a psychokinetic, psychospiritual, emotional, frequency, biomagnetic, species-wide level. When I talk about the neglected species-wide trauma that desperately needs healing, it isn't some abstract thing. It's a deep-rooted, generational, culturally perpetuated issue that is central, in my opinion, to just about everything that is culturally toxic, abusive, and unacceptable. And we can argue for another set of millennia over which ideology is the most righteous and true, or we can heal ourselves, we can chuck all this bullshit ideology, and we can repair the damage that we caused ourselves, generationally speaking. Because we have always been each other. Our parents were us, separated by time, context, and ego matrix and ideological conditioning. That's what I got to say about that, folks. As always, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, please be good human beings to each other out there in the real world, as well as in the game lobbies.